voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
This committee, from Inauguration Day until 4 weeks ago, was largely silent in terms of oversight. We haven't lifted a finger on election security. Attorney General Sessions told us on November 14th that he has done nothing to secure the next election from threats from at home and abroad. We have not once discussed the president's abuse of the pardon power, and we have not held a single hearing on allegations of obstruction of justice at the White House. Not for lack of evidence, but because, in the chairman's words, quote, there is a special counsel in place examining the issue, unquote, and, quote, several other congressional committees are looking into the matter, and the committee, quote, does not have the time to conduct this critical oversight. Now, with the year coming to a close, with the leadership of the Department of Justice finally before us, what do my Republican colleagues want to discuss? Hillary Clinton's emails. As we saw in our recent hearings with the Department of Justice and the FBI, my Republican colleagues seem singularly focused on their call for a second special counsel, and failing that, on the need to investigate the investigators themselves. I understand the instinct to want to change the subject after the Flynn and Manafort indictments, but this request is grossly misguided for a number of reasons. First, it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how the special counsel regulations work. The department cannot simply assign a special counsel to look at things that bother the White House. So far, there has been no credible factual or legal claim that anybody at the Department of Justice violated any law by deciding not to bring charges against Hillary Clinton or by attempting to meet with Fusion GPS. In other words, there is no investigation to which the department could even assign a new special counsel. Second, the list of grievances raised by the majority for review by a new special counsel also seems wildly off the mark. For example, there is nothing unlawful about Director Comey's sitting down to draft an early statement about the Clinton investigation, nor would it have been unethical to outline his conclusions before the investigation was over if the clear weight of the evidence pointed in one direction. Nor is there anything wrong with FBI agents expressing their private political views via private text message. In fact, department regulations expressly permit that sort of private communication. The president's call for an investigation of the investigation is at best wildly dangerous to our democratic institutions. On the one hand, the president's old lock her up cheer seems quaint after a couple of guilty pleas by Trump associates. I understand the instinct to want to give cover to the president. I am fearful that the majority's effort to turn the tables on the special counsel will get louder and more frantic as the walls continue to close in around the president. But this committee has a job to do. President Trump has engaged in a persistent and dangerous effort to discredit both the free press and the Department of Justice. These are the agencies and institutions under our jurisdiction. I hope my colleagues will use today's hearing as an opportunity to find their way back to the true work of the House Judiciary Committee.
It is Thursday, December 14th of 2017, and West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is now open. That's right, if you missed the board out front, it is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday, our daily special, especially special for you, very special people, and thank you for joining us today. We've got a big day. I had a fairly long clip of Jerry Nadler taking his committee to task, and I tried editing it down to a minute, but there was just too much there that needed well, to be shared. And so, and what was Nadler complaining about? Well, you got this little thing with a foreign power coming in here, and let's be clear, they're trying to take over America with the help of the person who's in the Oval Office right now. And Nadler's committee wants to investigate Hillary Clinton. And it does beg the question, are these Republicans that are so adamant in steering investigations away from the Russian collusion or interference because they may be on the take from the Russians? Follow the rubles. You gotta follow the rubles. Indeed. Every day is a big news day, and it's almost like a broken record. I apologize. I didn't report on this when it occurred because I just there's just so much salaciousness going on. With these sexual scandals or whatnot. But the GOP state representative from Kentucky who announced in a very bizarre press conference where he was singing church hymns, he had been accused of molesting a teen girl in a church where he was a pastor, denied the allegations, and said he was not resigning. And then the next day, which was yesterday, he apparently committed suicide and left a note calling the allegations fake news. I'm not one of those types who say, well, he got what was coming to him. It's a tragedy all around. And I would have wanted this person to be brought to trial so that the teen girl would achieve justice. I think committing suicide is not giving this girl justice, and that's odd. Omarosa has been fired, but apparently she will, according to the White House, she has a job until January, except the Secret Service won't let her in. Because, she tried to get into the residence and and she set off alarms. Real alarms. And the Secret Service had to spirit her out of there, kicking and screaming. Morgan Spurlock of Supersize Me has admitted to sexual misconduct. I'm shocked. Alrighty. Well, of course, to get back on the Nadler thing. Just very quickly, we all know that as Mueller gets closer and closer to winding up this investigation, and I'm not sure he is actually winding up. I just think he has a mountain full of evidence, and expect to see more Republican recalcitrance and fealty to Trump, and more outlandish responses and behaviors by Donald Trump. That's what we're up against, folks. And then also, of course, we should mention and note that it is the 5-year anniversary of the murders at Sandy Hook, and it still cuts deep. And I don't think I will ever get over it, and I never will. All right. We better get into the issues that we will be serving up here at the Front Cafe. And thank you for joining us, really. Okay, so on the rest of the menu, we will examine how after black voters powered Doug Jones to victory in Alabama, the GOP has now declared their votes do not count. Yeah, for months, everybody said, when Roy Moore wins, Alabama will have spoken, and you've got to accept that election. Well, they're singing a different tune now, aren't they? Yes, indeed. Activist DeRay McKesson sues Fox News and Jeanine Pirro for defamation over a claim that he directed violence at a Black Lives Matter protest. And as Trump's FCC is set to vote on internet censorship, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman uncovers an explosive corruption scandal. Then after the break, of course, we move to the chef's table, and today we're going to explore Doug Jones' fearless stance on science and clean energy. And after studying more than 1.1 million births in Pennsylvania, researchers discover babies born near fracking sites face lower birth weights. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Alrighty. Before we dive into these first dishes here at the Front Cafe, I should remind folks that if you go to netrootsradio.com, of course that is our homepage, scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll find on the right-ish the chat room link. Kelly Lincoln, Roaring Girl, monitors that quite frequently during the day, and that's a good way to get a hold of us. Another good way to get a hold of me is at Justice Putnam on Twitter, or go to Daily Kos. I'm Justice Putnam there as well. Now, at the bottom of the home page, if you look to the leftish from the chat room link, you will find the Donate Contribute buttons, deftly located there by superior graphic design, to encourage and entice your generosity in keeping Netroots Radio beaming 24/7, 365. And your generosity has been doing that, so thank you very much. And we will continue doing the good work that, I believe is expected of us. All right. Let's... Oh, and I should mention one more time, too, podcasts of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy will become available very soon. I'm just finishing up some last parts of the application process and whatnot. So just hopefully, if not just before Christmas, just after. All right, so thank you. All right, so we better get into these articles since we had a bit of time taken up from Jerry Nadler taking his committee to task. This next article, or this first article here that we're going to be serving up at the Front Cafe, is by Oliver Willis out of Share Blue. After weeks of asserting that the will of Alabama voters was the final word on the state's special election, Republicans are now insisting that since they lost, thanks in large part to black voters, the results don't quite count anymore. Soon after it became clear that Doug Jones would defeat Roy Moore, Senator Cory Gardner, Republican of Colorado, head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, released a bizarre statement calling on Jones to switch parties. That sentiment was echoed by Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, who tweeted, "Doug Jones now answers to Alabamians who overwhelmingly support," she says the P word, "President Trump's conservative agenda, not Schumer and Democrat Party bosses who prioritize obstructional tax cuts and economic revival for Americans." Oliver Willis makes a statement that notion is absurd. Jones ran on a platform supported by millions of Democrats. He opposes efforts to gut Obamacare, noting, "I am disturbed about repeated efforts to repeal the bill or weaken it, leaving as many as 32 million more Americans without insurance." Jones supports a living wage and slammed the Republican tax scheme. He told reporters he was troubled by tax breaks for the wealthy, which seemed to be in this bill overloaded, he said. He also called out the provisions that would raise taxes on the middle class. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is rushing to pass a tax hike on the middle class before Jones is seated. And there's a little bit of hardball being played here, too, because the Secretary of State of Alabama, who is a Roy Moore and Donald Trump acolyte, may not certify the election, or at least grossly delay it. And then he has to, meaning Doug Jones, has to be seated as a senator. And Mitch McConnell can hold that up, too. The will of the people, indeed. Oh, and Roy Moore has still not conceded. And I've been hearing the reason why is because his evangelical belief won't allow him to accept that God willed a Democrat to win. Okay, the next course coming up right now from the kitchen out here to the front cafe is by Graham Langtree out of Newsweek. Black Lives Matter activist DeRay McKesson is suing Fox News and Fox News host Jeanine Pirro for defamation after she claimed during an appearance on Fox and Friends that he directed someone to throw a rock at a police officer's face. Early this week, DeRay McKesson, who was himself sued along with the Black Lives Matter movement by a police officer who was seriously injured in the incident at a Baton Rouge protest in 2016, filed suit against Pirro. The officer's case was dismissed in September by a federal judge in Louisiana who ruled McKesson could not be liable for the officer's injuries and that there was no evidence that he gave specific instructions to the unidentified protester who threw the rock. A day after the ruling, Pirro, who hosts the show Justice with Judge Jeanine, appeared as a commentator on Fox and Friends and said, quote, McKesson, the organizer, actually was directing the violence. Now, some people might call that a lie, wouldn't they? Indeed. During the segment, Pirro points out that the judge who dismissed the suit was appointed by former President Barack Obama, an African American. She claimed the ruling was motivated by politics and made by an activist judge who was black. And you know they all stick together. I mean, even look at Colin Powell. Did he really endorse Barack Obama because of Barack Obama's policies? Or because he was black? Okay, Jeanine. You can put the pointy head down next to you while you continue. McKesson claims that Pirro defamed him by making the statements while discussing the lawsuit after it had been dismissed. Defendant Pirro, a lawyer for over 40 years, discussing a well-publicized matter, was aware that these outrageous statements were false and made them with the specific intention of harming Mr. McKesson, his suit claims. Falsely stating that Mr. McKesson assaults police officers has seriously endangered Mr. McKesson's physical safety, it continued, because when he goes to other cities to give talks, he gets the crap beat out of him by cops because he directed violence in Baton Rouge for a cop to have a rock thrown right in the cop's face. Oh boy. In September, Pirro responded to McKesson's concerns and questions about her statement from the Washington Post. She said, based on 32 years in law enforcement, you can only be found not guilty after a trial. McKesson was not tried. I was quoting paragraphs 17 and 19 from court documents, she said. And, of course, Fox News claims that Pirro's statements are protected First Amendment speech. Writing to Mr. McKesson's counsel that our commentary was fully protected under the First Amendment and the privilege for reports of judicial proceedings, we will defend this case vigorously. Okay. Now they're for the First Amendment. They weren't very much for McKesson's First Amendment, or Black Lives Matter for that matter, because obviously they're all cop killers, aren't they? So they don't have rights. And I got to tell you, Black Lives Matter are not cop killers. It's ludicrous on its face, and we all know that. But, okay, Jeanine, we'll see how you fare. Of course, in this country, libel and slander are hard judicial proceedings to prevail in. But we'll keep track of this as it wends its way through the courts. Alrighty, our last offering here in the front cafe is by Eric Bullard from Share Blue Media. Trump's FCC refuses to investigate the massive scheme to create fake grassroots support for gutting net neutrality. And there's a vote today. Isn't that convenient? Raising grave new concerns about the process by which Donald Trump's FCC is moving ahead to overturn net neutrality rules that protect consumer choice on the internet, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman announced that millions of fake comments had been filed with the FCC in an effort to mimic grassroots support for internet censorship. The FCC's vote on net neutrality is scheduled for today, but Schneiderman is calling for the commission to delay its final decision until it can be determined who's responsible for the massive scheme. I don't know. You might want to look at a little bit of Cyrillic coding, and I think you may find it. Or simply just follow the rubles. Schneiderman announced millions of fake comments have corrupted the FCC public process, including 2 million that stole the identities of real people, which is a crime under New York law. He continued, moving forward with this vote would make a mockery of our public comment process and reward those who perpetuated this fraud to advance their own hidden agenda. The FCC must postpone this vote and work with us to get to the bottom of what happened. But Ajit Pai was put in there to overturn everything that the black guy did. Or let's put it this way. Anything that was in place when the black guy was there has to be overturned. And since the Constitution was in place when the black guy was running things, it has to be overturned, replaced with something new and better for our overlords. I should remind folks that throughout West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, even in the most small little nook and cranny, be aware that it is always in this reporter's opinion. Because look up at the sign. We refuse to give service and the straight news because we have a sign that says it. Okay. Meanwhile, Representative Mike Kaufman, Republican of Colorado, became the first member of Congress to call for the FCC to delay its vote to repeal net neutrality. That's interesting. Last month, FCC Commission Chairman Ajit Pai, who was installed by Trump earlier this year, announced that the Republican-controlled commission would vote in December to gut net neutrality rules that were put in place during the Obama administration. I don't know. I started off being a poet, and I would have just said they want to overturn everything the black guy was in office during. I don't know how poetic that is, but it kind of gets to the point. And then, as an aside, folks, because there's always more here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, a cornucopia of abundance of more, they, with a capital T, have the audacity to say it's Obama that's obsessed with Trump. Oh, God. Blame your enemies for that with which you are guilty. That has a certain Teutonic ring to it, doesn't it? Okay. Let's see. Such a decision would give internet providers broad powers to determine what websites and online services that customers can see and use, which is exactly what an authoritarian regime needs. They can't have unfettered access for people to get information willy-nilly and being able to make up their own opinions. I mean, first of all, we have to get people to buy things. All right? And if you can get people to buy things, you can get people to vote for things, too. I mean, isn't the presidency a product? Isn't government a product? I suppose it is now. Okay. Let's see. The scheme, like so much of the Republican policy agenda this year, is wildly unpopular with voters. But I would also note that 3 million more people voted for Hillary And that didn't matter. In fact, a new poll from the University of Maryland shows that large majorities of Americans, including 3 out of 4 Republicans, oppose the government's plan to repeal its net neutrality rules for internet providers, according to the Washington Post. And that's where the rampant fraud comes in. When the FCC undertakes a major public policy initiative, they post what is called a notice of proposed rulemaking, which urges interested parties, whether it's corporations, lobbyists, or just lowly citizens, to file comments and detail their support or opposition of the pending issue before the commission. But soon after the public comment period opened up, it was discovered that a massive amount of the comments in favor of dismantling net neutrality were fake, using names and addresses that had been previously stolen, like maybe from the DNC hack. Lots of information there, lots of names of Democratic voters, contributors, and fellow travelers. All right. Commenters fraudulently posed as real Americans and flooded the debate in an effort to create the impression of grassroots support for gutting net neutrality. And Ajit Pai says, we got all these comments. They want censorship. We got to gut net neutrality. Let's do it. Look, I got bags and bags and bags of comments. Schneiderman's office quickly determined that tens of thousands of New Yorkers may have had their identities misused as part of the scheme and that hundreds of thousands may have been affected nationwide. Well, I think it's more than that. Schneiderman updated those figures yesterday, announcing that more than 2 million of the comments from people all over the country were posted using fake identities. There you go. To date, more than 5,000 people have confirmed specific pro-net neutrality comments posted at the FCC were forgeries. In fact, there's well-known celebrity types who and elected folk whose parents, who might have been dead for 15 years, commented that they want censorship on the net. Despite the criminal nature of the comments, Trump's FCC is not interested in investigating the scheme because they're trying to gut not only net neutrality, but the whole agency and every single institution that is America. And they've got help. Over the summer, Schneiderman contacted the FCC and urged it to help identify who was behind the massive misinformation campaign, but the FCC has refused to cooperate. Maybe Mueller needs to look into this. Nearly 30 Senate Democrats recently expressed their dismay and have urged the FCC to investigate. The public debate, and this is finishing up by Bullard, by the way, the public debate has been corrupted by fake comments, and Trump's FCC doesn't even care to find out who did it. Instead, they're plowing ahead with a vote on a massively unpopular scheme that will affect nearly every American nationwide. Under these circumstances, the result of any such vote will be just as fraudulent as the comments. And, you know, as time and space would have it, while I've been broadcasting, they may have taken their vote, and I have no idea that everything I just stated is moot. But in spite of that, this is the time that we really should be going to our break, and so we will. Because we have to clean up the front cafe, make it look all nice and tidy so they don't know that we're back at the chef's table, which is really where the speakeasy is. Yeah, that's where the hidden stuff is, folks. But we'll go to our break, set up the chef's table for our discussion back there, and we'll do that. So you are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Free and open access to the Internet is a virtuous democratic principle known as net neutrality, meaning the system doesn't care if you're a brand-name corporation or an unknown startup, a billionaire or a poverty-wage laborer. You are entitled to equal treatment in sending or getting information on the World Wide Web. However, corporate executives never let virtue stand in the way of profit. We're told that access to this information highway is crucial to your and my educational achievement, future prosperity, and ability to be self-governing, as well as being vital to our nation's well-being. Yet, access onto the digital highway is not a public service, but instead is controlled and sold to us by a few for-profit corporations, so few of them that selling Internet service has become a non-competitive market, letting service providers extract excess profits from customers. And now they've convinced Donald Trump and company to dump the idea of net neutrality, viewing its public benefit as an unwarranted obstacle to their desire to grab greater profits. Here's their scheme. 1, rather than having one big broadband freeway open for transporting everyone's content, the Internet service monopolists intend to create a special system of high-speed lanes for the richest producers of content. 2, this express lane will be made available to those who want to rush their information, viewpoints, programs, etc. to the public, leaving everyone else's content jammed up in the slow lanes. And 3, the Internet providers will charge a premium price to those who can afford to have their content channeled into the high-speed toll lanes. This is Jim Hightower saying a broad coalition of enraged and net-savvy groups has arisen to defend the Internet's democratic essence. You can join them by visiting battleforthenet.com.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Monday, December 11th, 2017. I'm Mark Boulanger.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
That is Eleanor Roosevelt reading the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted by the United Nations on December 10th, 1948. Ms. Roosevelt was the chair of the UN Commission that drafted the declaration. Amongst the human rights proclaimed as universal by the UN are employment, pay equity, union membership, time off work, free education, and respect for the work of artists.
Article 23(1). Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favourable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. 2. Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. 3. Everyone who works has the right to just and favourable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity, and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. 4. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests. Article 24. Everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitations of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. Article 25(1). Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. 2. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Article 27.1. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. 2. Everyone has the right to the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production of which he is the author. Article 28. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration can be fully realized.
This week, India is our hotspot for union activity. Here, with his report, is Labour Start correspondent Derek Blackadder.
Our hotspot this week is India. A strike by public sector nurses in India was broken last week after the courts threatened to jail union members participating in the strike. A state Supreme Court justice told the nurses to quit their jobs and work elsewhere if they were unhappy with their wages. Also last week, a British university study found that 48,000 workplace deaths can be confirmed in India each year. Many others go unreported, and even this total does not include the victims of occupational disease. 280 factory workers have been occupying their workplace since the 21st of November in an effort to force their employer to recognize their union. This is a common union tactic in a country where labor rights exist but are not actively enforced. And finally, a state government has ordered the dismissal of 80,000 striking healthcare workers, throwing the state's medical system into disarray. The issue in the strike? The regularization of contract workers. Regularization is a common cause of strike action in India where there are two classes of workers, regular and contractual. Regular workers have many more rights and entitlements than do day or casual workers under Indian labor law. This is Derek Blackadder from Labour Start, reporting for Radio Labour.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
All right, so we've cleaned up and closed everything down in the front cafe and turned it into, well, the cookbook store, because that's the facade to hide the chef's table, which is really our speakeasy. And it's a intimate little spot in which we can discuss issues a little bit more in depth while we're actually preparing the dishes in which you will enjoy. And you get it's like a presentation kitchen, folks. Yes, it is indeed. Oh, I should also mention the CDC PSA about making sure your tailpipe is not blocked by snow. It might also be a good time to remind people, get some new windshield wipers. And make sure your tires are the right kind for the season. And if you're in snow country, make sure you always carry chains, an extra coat. And I always like to have, a tarp and a blanket to put on the tarp if I ever have to get down on the ground and under the car or the vehicle, whatever it might be. So be prepared, folks. Please do. All right, let's look at weather here. We'll start off with local weather along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, because that is where the mothership for Netroots Radio is. I will say that if North Korea, for some unknown reason, is able to figure out how not to fire a missile straight up in the air, and they're able to actually lob it here and hit, where I am, don't worry, Netroots Radio can still exist because we have other people hidden all over the world. That's right. Okay, here in Rogue River, Oregon, it is currently 24 degrees. We are expected to go up, they say, Weather Underground says 58. Yesterday they said we were going to be like 54, and we barely got to 40. So I don't know where it was that warm. Maybe at someone's lodge while they're drinking a hot toddy. That's how come it seems so warm. We will, by my garden thermometers throughout my property, I believe that we will only get up to about, we'll say 43. And tonight we will be in the mid-20s once again. Dry conditions will prevail, though tomorrow, Friday, we're looking at a big blob of rain coming into the area. And if that doesn't warm up because of the cloud cover, we may have snow. Now, the air quality has now become very unhealthy for sensitive groups here in Rogue River, which does impact my mom. And the air quality index is at 107 particles per million. Ouch. Pressure is still decreasing just a tad at 30.3 inches. Visibility at 10 miles, though we are as well under a freezing fog advisory. And it is cold and freezing, and there's fog out there. Humidity at 67%. All right, so, and I should mention also winds are light and variable out of the northeast, about 3 miles per hour. Though tonight and tomorrow, they should be going up to about 10 to 12 miles an hour. So that's a little stiff. Okay, so weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And they're not even libertarians. And these people live around the world. London is 43 and clear. Paris is 44 degrees, just ticked to 44 degrees with light rain showers. And Rome is 57 and overcast. Both Paris and Rome remain under wind advisory, possibility of power disruptions because of winds. Kiev is 34 degrees and overcast. Kabul is 36 and overcast. Hong Kong, 67 and overcast. Tokyo, 51 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 71 and clear. San Francisco, California is 47 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 29 degrees Fahrenheit and overcast. Okay. Well, people get to go ice skating now. It makes it more fun, doesn't it? And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they have purchased, and these people live around the world. Okay, after a little tasty morsel of the weather, let's get into a little bit more of a flavor profile. This is by Mark Hand out of Think Progress. And in Alabama, environmental advocates see great hope in this election outcome because Alabama's newest senator isn't afraid to take a strong stance on science and clean energy. And the GOP wants him to change parties? Yeah. Okay. Alabama will be sending a new senator to Washington who believes in science, opposes Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, and supports future investments in renewable energy over fossil fuels. While environmental issues were not at the forefront of Doug Jones' victorious Senate campaign, the former federal prosecutor ran on a decidedly progressive platform in a deep red state. Ooh, a deep state. Yeah, they have their own deep state there. It's called the Old Boys Network. Just filling you in on some secret, ballpark information there. Yeah, it's in the ballpark. Okay, including clear stances on climate action and clean energy, and after his surprise win, Jones will be in a position to deliver greater federal funding to protect Alabama's environment. At the national level, Jones' election to the Senate gives the Democrats another weapon to fight Trump's anti-environment agenda. Don't let McConnell know. He'll hold that up, and so will the Secretary of State in Alabama. What? And what is this that all the FBI agents working in the Bureau have to sign a loyalty agreement to Der Fuhrer, or as I like to say, Herr Führer? So I guess here, Doug Jones is obviously a Trump hater because he thinks that we should be able to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and follow the scientific method, which is really tantamount to... Trump always talks about his brother who's a scientist at MIT. I think he hates the guy. And this is his way of get back. Okay. The fact that Jones felt obligated to express his belief in science demonstrates the times we live in. And I will mention that we didn't hear much from Doug Jones, did we? Though he did give statements and interviews, and he gave a big statement to the Sierra Club and Nature and others about his stance on science. And that the fact that Jones felt obligated to express those beliefs, well, we're not supposed to have a religious test to run for office, but if you're not Christian enough in certain segments of our society, certain segments, like all of it, you won't be able to run. In fact, you have to swear. When you take office, you have to take an oath and swear on a Bible. It's the law. That's what they think. Okay, the Trump administration is filled with officials who deny the science behind climate change and other environmental and public health hazards, lead and water. Come on. There's no such thing. While Republicans will have a 51-49 majority, Jones' election victory makes the calculus in the Senate harder for the Republicans and for Mitch McConnell to advance Trump's agenda and the priorities that the Trump administration has, which have been bad, environmentally speaking, wouldn't you say? One of the unstated aspects of when Doug Jones was a prosecutor is that he took on major corporations who were fouling the environment in Alabama. So, and I got to tell you, if there's a big chemical company who's fouling the environment more than the pig farmers in Alabama, it's bad. It is really, really bad. Cindy Lowry, executive director of the Alabama Rivers Alliance, emphasized that Jones did not run on the environment. That's not going to get you elected in Alabama. Of course not. But he cares about people, and he cares about justice and equality. That kind of ethic is important on environmental issues because so many of our environmental problems are most held on the backs of people of low income and people of color and communities that cannot afford to address the major threats to our waterways. And I think that was why a lot of the old boy network, the deep state of Alabama, were fearful of a Doug Jones. Because if you're going to foul the environment, you got to make sure that the poor people will live in there. Because you don't want them living with you. But now they have Doug Jones to contend with because he is now a U.S. Senator. Okay, this next article rounding out your experience here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy here at the chef's table is also by Mark Hand out of Think Progress. Babies born to mothers living within 2/3 of a mile from a fracking well site see a 25% increase in the probability of significantly low birth weight, a condition linked to other health problems later in life, according to a new study. Actually, the conditions linked to health problems later in life have already been established, but according to the new study in which they tested 1.1 million births in Pennsylvania, the research adds to a growing body of scientific work that links the controversial extraction process with adverse effects on the environment and people. Of course, I've worked in the exploration and production industry, oil industry, and you will hear from them diametrically opposed opinions and behaviors. One is that no one ever wants to live near where they work. Number two, you always take off whatever it was that you were working in, even if you changed at the tank farm or the refinery. Just walking across the parking lot or whatnot to your vehicle to drive home, you don't wear those shoes in the house. You don't. Everybody who works in that industry knows not to do that. And then later on, when they're tied up with tubes and breathing apparatus and whatnot, and you go visit them, they'll always say, there's no danger in what we did. Yeah. Well, fortunately, I didn't work at it, long enough, almost a decade. But I took care, shall we say. Okay, based on an analysis of more than 1.1 million births in Pennsylvania between 2004 and 2013, the researchers found that babies born to mothers who lived within 1 kilometer or 0.64 miles, almost 2/3, okay, lived that far from or that close to a fracking well weighed on average 1.38 ounces less than babies born to women whose pregnancy occurred 3 kilometers or more from a fracking site. This guy's using Celsius, and what's going on here? We don't measure like that. This guy must be Brit. How dare he? The Princeton University, University of Chicago, and UCLA, which is the University of California at Los Angeles, though the researchers came from those schools, found little evidence of health effects at distances beyond 3 kilometers, suggesting that health impacts of fracking are highly local. Oh, I get it now. These damn scientists are using a gradient that is much more accurate than our feet and inches. Given the growing evidence that pollution affects babies in utero, it should not be surprising that fracking, which is a heavy industrial activity, has negative effects on infants. Now remember, what they're doing with fracking is not getting some sort of oil. They're getting microscopic bubbles of natural gas that are buried in hard rock. It's get every last drop of whale oil until there's no whales left. And now we're pulverizing rock to get the microscopic bubbles of natural gas out. I think we should start looking at other ways of making steam to turn a turbine. But that's just me. As I've said before, I'm a romantic. The authors admit that the study was only exploring potential pollution, not actual exposure, and even said that such pathways are not known with certainty. Instead, the authors relied on a simple spatial correlation to suggest that the closer mothers live to production sites, the more likely they are to have babies with lower birth weights. In a 2014 study that examined babies born from 1996 to 2009 in rural Colorado, researchers found that women who lived close to natural gas wells were more likely to have children born with a variety of defects from oral clefts to heart issues. Well, of course, if you're saturating the air with natural gas, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about tar oil. We're talking about a gas. And we're going to great lengths. And I want to know, how much energy are we putting in to pulverize rock to get microscopic bubbles of gas in enough quantities that it drives the cost of oil down? And in the process, harm generations of babies, and so then we have to tend to that later on. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf, Democrat, has been a strong supporter of shale gas drilling in the state since taking office in January of 2015. Pennsylvania's natural gas production reached a new high of 15 billion cubic feet per day in October, an increase of 25% from 2016 levels and an increase of 80% from January of 2013. Currently, Pennsylvania accounts for 19% of total U.S. natural gas production, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. And I'm sure that's another bureau that's going to be shut down because Trump doesn't want us to know that. Well, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for today. And we'll be back here, of course, bright and bushy tomorrow. We have a little bit of cleaning up to do here in the kitchen. But we'll be back here for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So, we'll hide the fact that the Speakeasy is just being extended into the front cafe, but we'll hide that fact for tomorrow. So stay tuned for the rest of the day today. Tom Hartman coming up about 6 minutes after the hour, followed by Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, and then Randy Rhodes takes up the bulk of the afternoon. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365, please do. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-da-da. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.